Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for watching this video. In this video, we are going to learn how we can create dependent table in VBCS. Everything to learn from scratch one by one. So what you are going to learn mainly in this video. First, how we can show the business object data into VBCS table object. Secondly, how we can create dependent database table so that the second table data can be based on the first table records. So all these things we are going to learn in this video. If you will see the sample screen, I added the screenshot. Here you can see when user selected the fourth row, that fourth row having the department as D02, and in the below table it's showing only data which having the department D02. So that kind of things application we are going to create in this video. So let's begin. So this is our VBCS application, where in previous video only we already created this business object, the employee business object having the details, that employee ID, first name, last name, gender, and the department ID as a D01, D02, 3, 4. And if you will see the department business object, the department business object having the department ID as D0123, and the department code and the department name. All these things we have here. So based on that only we are going to create a web page. It will show the dependent database, dependent data. So first we have to create the page. So all these are business objects. For creating the page, we have to go to the web page application, and in web application we have to create the new web page. So we can directly click here, or we can click on this plus icon. So I'm just going to click here in the web application. I have to give the name. So what kind of name it will be? I will give the name as dependent table page, PG. And the style I will select as none, so that everything I can add manually. Click on create. So once we will create on create, a new page will be created, and the default page name as main start. We can change this name too, but I don't want to change right now. So to hide this web application tab, just click here, it will hide, so that we will have extra space in this main screen. So here I don't want this main and all these things, I have to delete. So just go to the code, and directly you can select all, delete, and go to the design. You will not see anything. Now here we have to add everything. I just want to add highlight first, header first, just like you can see list of employee, this header. So for adding that one, we have the header component. You can see the heading components. I will drag this heading component, and I will make it bit a small. So give as 6, like make it H5 here, and I have to change the name. I will give the name that it text as list of employees. So this is our text. Now below that we have to add the table. So we have the table component. This table components, once we will drag, it will ask the source of the data. What is the source of this table? So once you will click on the table component, go to the properties, and here you can quick start. You will have option to add the data source. So in this table, we want to show data from business object. So just click on this one, and here you can see whatever business object we created in the system, in this application, it will reflect here. So we have 3 business object, that is address BO, department BO, and the employee BO. So I will select employee BO and next. If you want to add filter and all the things, you can add, but what column I want to show. So list of column we want to show on the page, we have to select the column. So I just want to show the first column as department ID, and the sorry, first column I want to show as that employee ID, the first name, last name, gender, and the email address, and the department ID. So all these things, even we have the ID column created automatically. We can use that ID to fetch the data. So let me add that one too. So now we added all the column. If you want to make the column lower and upper, you can replace the column by dragging here, right? So all these things you can do. So I don't want to do anything here. And here by default, it's taking the primary key as ID column. If you want to change, you can change it from here. So right now I don't want to change anything. So I will make that ID as a primary key for this business object table. Click next. If you want to add any filter to restrict data to display, you can add, or let it be same. Go finish. So whatever data we have in the business object, all data will list here. You will be able to see. If I will run this application, you will be able to see the table, and table is displaying all the data. So that is the first step we have to display. Now here you can see these are the table data, right? So we have all these 8 employee over there and this is display. Now we have to add the new table below, that is the employee department table, and that table data will be based on the above user selected. So you can see right now we are selecting here, we don't, it's not reflecting anything, right? For that we have to add another table below. So before going to add table, I want to add heading again. I will add the heading. And what's the name of this heading? So you can see employee departments. I will change the text as employees department, right? So now you can see it said that I have to make it bit small. So I will go and make it at 6. So you can see that it's moving as a small. So now we have to add the table to display the department, right? So I will go and select the table component. This is a table component. I will drag this table components below. And now again, we have to select the data source for this table. So again, go to the properties of this table, click on this add data, select the business object. So the business object is department BO. So I will select this department BO, go to next. Here, what all column you want to display, we have to add the column. So again, I want to display the ID column and the department ID, department code, department name, that is department, and the manager of that department. All these who columns I don't want to display, so let it be same. By default, primary key is the ID that automatically generated. I don't want to change. If you want, you can change from here only and just go to next. If you want to add filter, you can add filter to restrict data. So I will show you how we can restrict. So as of now, if you will see, when the table page will be loaded, user is not going to select any row. Ideally, there should not be any records in the table, right? So how we can do, I will show you. So first I want to show all the data so that we can understand well. Click on finish. So now you can see below we have the department table and department table having all the data, right? So let me run this application again. So now you can see in this page all the department value is displaying here. If I will select here the first employee, second employee, it's not showing doing any changes here. But we want to display these department details in such a way so that whenever user will click on any row, based on that row only, it should change the department details. So how we can restrict this one? So the first thing we have to do, so whenever this page will load, there should not be any data here, right? So we have to restrict that one. So how we can restrict? So let's move to the page again, development page. So this is our development page. So here we have to restrict the data to display in the department one, right? So for that, when we want to restrict, so whenever this page will loaded, it will just display this one. Don't want to display this one, the department details. So we have to restrict that one, right? And we have to add the validation, a filter. So go to the development page. Here we have this department. So whenever page is loading, we have the, so we have VB Inter event, which is loading whenever page is loaded, right? So on that VB Inter event, we have to do the validation so that this table should not display any data. So click on page anywhere in the page so that it can show you the event, page event. Go to the page event, click here on the VB Inter, and here we can restrict that one. So how we can restrict? Just we have to go to the assign variable. In assign variable, we have to add that variable. So that variable value, it will come from the business object. That variable you can see the department business object list SDP. Inside that we have all these things, right? So this is the one way we can do. Another way we can, even without creating the VB Inter event, we can do that one. So how we can restrict? So let me remove this. Let me remove this action chain, that page VB Inter event. All right. And now what we can do? So you can see this is our page, right? So whenever we are adding any business object table here, automatically variable is created. The variable is, you can see, the department BO list SDP and the employee BO list SDP. So these two variable automatically created whenever we are adding any table based on that business object. So for this one, we have the variable as department business object. In that variable, if you will go to the properties, here we have the filter. You can see filter criteria. So once you will click on this filter criteria, we can add the mapping. So you can see this is the filter criteria, and what filter we want to add, click on this one, condition. So I want to add the filter on this one, department ID contain or equals to -1. So this is the false condition we are adding. So whenever this variable will be created, new filter it will be added, and the filter condition will be department ID is equals to -1. And if you will see the business object, department business object, we doesn't have any department ID which having the value as -1. So it means that whenever this page will load, where this is our main page. So whenever this page will load, it will not show any data. Even you can see here, once we added the condition, we are not able to see any data in this table. Let me run this page again. And here you can see, this is our employee table. And in the employee table, we have the records, we have the data, but in the below department table, we don't have any records because we added the filter condition here in that variable only. So this variable will automatically create when this page will load to show the data in table, and whenever that variable is creating, we added the filter here in that variable so that it will not display any record. And we want to remove this filter. We want to remove this filter only whenever user will click on any row, that filter should remove and it should pass this department ID. You can see. So once if we created here in this row, this department ID should pass to this filter criteria of this below table. So how we can fetch this department ID first, right? So for fetching this department ID, let me add the logic. So go to the page design. So we want whenever user will click on any row, something will happen, right? Something should happen. So how that something should happen? So once we will click on this table, go to the event, and here we have one event called first select row. This first select row is event. That event occur whenever user will click on any row. So whenever user will click on any row, that event will occur. This event will occur, and the event will call the action chain. The action chain name here by default it's showing the table first select row change chain, right? And here what action we want to perform. So whenever user will click on any row, by default it will generate the ID of this row. It will return the ID of this row. What is the ID? You can see the 6 5 4 3 2. Here you can see, and that ID will store here in this key, row key. Row key will hold the ID of that row, ID of this row, and this is not the department ID. This is the ID of this row, that is this one ID, right? So here if you will see that, go to the page design again. This is the table, and here you can see the parameters. What parameters we are passing to action chain? These two parameter. Row data is the something, that is the data, and the row key is the ID, primary ID of this table. When we added the business object to this table, at the time we have to option to select the primary key. That's the primary key here we have as a key, right? And this key we want to pass to this table. So before going to pass, I just want to show that key, how that key is reflecting. So go to the action chain. In the action chain, that is table first action chain, here in the row data row key we have that value. So first, before going to do anything, I want to display that one so that you can be sure. So I will add the fire notification. I will select the notification type as info, and the display message I want to show something like the value, right? So here we have to give any value. So some display value as department ID. Department ID. And here what message I want to display? So click on this F1. I want to display the value row key it's returning, and this row key is nothing. This row key is the row ID of that employee, row ID of this row. So row ID of this row is 3, row ID of this row is 1, row ID of this row is 7. So this value it will return. So here I am just going to show you row ID is this one, right? So just click on save. So what will happen if you will go to the page designer? Whenever user will click on any of the row, notification will be occur, and that notification will display the ID of this row. So if you will go to the live mode of that page, it's taking bit of time to load sometimes. So now you can see if I will click on the first row, you can see the notification is displaying department ID, the value we mentioned, and you can see the row ID is 1. If I will click the seventh row, you can see row ID is 7. If I will click on the fifth row, it will display row ID is 5. So this 5 I want to pass, based on this 5, I want to get this department ID, right? So that this department ID we can pass here in the condition. For getting this one department ID or rest of the details based on this ID, we have option to call endpoint rest endpoint for each and everything, right? So if you will go to the action chain here, so for each and every business object having the endpoint, right? Having the endpoint to get the data. So I want to, like, in the real time, go to the page. In the real time, when user will click on this row, any of the row, we will get that ID of this row, right? We will get the, sorry, we will get the ID of this row. Based on that ID of the row, we have to get the department ID and store somewhere else so that we can map the department ID here. For that, we will create one variable. So go to the variable, and that variable will store the ID, department ID, and the rest of the details from the employee table. So here we have to go to the variable creation. We'll give the name as employee details var, and what kind of, from where it will come, you can see the data will be a string. So instead of directly creating variable, I will create variable from the endpoint. So before going to create variable, we have to create the type. So go to the type here, and we have to create the type. So I will click on this type, and type will be created from endpoint. So I will click here, and what endpoint we have to get. So you can see whenever user will click on any row, I want to get this row details, and this row details is for the employee business object. So I will select this employee business object. Once you will expand here, you can see we have the get, and get option we have for the ID based on that ID. So once you will use this get option, this ID we have already this ID, right? So this ID we will pass here, and based on that it will return back this row, right? So here go to next. Now in this type, what kind of value here will give as employee details var details type, and what kind of value we are going to store to that variable or the type. So I just want to give something like ID, employee ID, and the department ID. This only three details, so that this department ID we can pass to the below table. So just go and finish. So new type is created, that is employee details type. This type having three variables: department ID, employee ID, and ID. So you can see this is the ID, this is the department ID, and this is the employee ID, right? Even same we can display here in the notification tool, right? So now here we have to go to the variable, and we have to create the variable. So click variable, give the name as employee details var, and what will be the type? So type will be the new type we created. So type we created here, employee details type. Click on create. So now new variable is created, employee details var, and that variable having these three values. So we want whenever user will click on any row, that variable, this variable should update with this value. This kind of things we want to add. So where we will do, we have already created action chain. This action chain is something whenever user will click on the row of the table. So here we are displaying the notification. So before going to display the notification, I want to store the value of this row into that variable. So how we can go? So we have to invoke the endpoint. So invoking the rest endpoint, we will drag this rest endpoint. And what endpoint we want to invoke? We want to invoke the endpoint to get the data from business object. So here we have to select that endpoint. So click on this select, and here you can see the employee business object. Expand, here you can see this is the same business object API for which we created the variable and type. So click select here. So now this API will hit, and for this API we have to pass the value as business object value, as you can see the not map that value as employee BOID, and this BOID we know that whenever this action chain is invoking, that action chain having the row key, and this row key is the employee ID. So I will click here, you can see this is the row key. I will map this row key with this employee employee bo underscore id, that is the URI parameters. Click on save. So now whenever this action chain will occur, that event will occur whenever user will select any of the row, action chain will occur, action chain will come here. It will call the endpoint to get the row details, the complete details based on this ID, and it will store the data into one variable. So now here we have to store this response of this API call to that variable, so that we have the assign variable action. I will add the assign variable, and here we have to select the variable. So what is our variable? If you will see, our variable is employee details var. This variable, and what kind of value we want to store to this variable? I want to store the response of this to that variable. So from where we will get the response? So you can see this is the value. If you will click here, you can go to that call rest business object get employee bo result. If you will expand, you can see the body. We have to map this body here. So by default it's coming 2 times. We will remove this one. This is the body, right? So just click on save. So what will happen whenever user will click on any of the row, this action chain will occur. This action chain will be invoked, the table first select row, and in the action chain what we are going to do, we are invoking the API business object API to get the business object details of that row based on the employee ID we map, and whatever response it will return, we are mapping this response to that variable. So that variable having 3 columns. So out of all the response, this 3 column will be filled. This 3 column will be filled here. And now we can show this variable data in the notification again before going to add here, so that we can have the clear idea, right? So again I will add the notification type. I will select as confirmation, and here we have to give a message that employee department details, and here what value we want to display. So if we will expand here, value I want to display something like employee ID. And what is the employee ID? Employee ID we have in the variable, that employee var, that is the employee ID. Employee ID, and after that I want to display something like department ID. This is the department ID coming from that variables. I don't know, there is some issue whenever I am dragging anything, it's coming twice. Oh, here this is wrong. So here it's coming, right? So let me save. So it will display something like employee ID, that is the employee ID, plus department ID, that is the department ID coming from the variable, the above variable, and it will show in the notification. Go to the page again and let me run this page. So once this run page will be run, we already added the filter condition here to not display the data, so it's not displaying data, that is correct. Whenever we will click on any of the row, notification should trigger, right? And you can see notification trigger, and that's showing value as employee ID and identify, department ID and identify. It means something we have done wrong, right? So go to the here action chain, this is the one, and what value we have done, it means that this variable doesn't have value yet, right? So there is something miss here in the variable only. So let me check. So here you can see we have one issue. If you will see that variable having single quotes, that is the incorrect value, right? So we will expand here. This should not be in the single quotes. That's the body, right? So once we will double click here, it should come without single quotes, right? So let me go to the code here. Go to the code. And this single quotes means a string. So I don't want to make that a string, right? So that should be the variable, right? So again, go to the design. And now here you can see this is the value. So this employee details var will be updated with the value coming from the call rest business object get employee bo result dot body, right? You can see body. So now this is fine. So again we have to go to the page. Let me run this application again. So hopefully this time it will show the data, because earlier there were issue in the mapping only. So now here you can see we have to click on any row, and whatever row we will click, you can see it will display that employee ID 1002. This is the 102 and the department ID D04. So we will click, if we will click here, you can see the ID is 1005 and department is D003. So now we are successfully able to get the data of that row in a variable, right? So this is the way we are working like while debugging, so that there should not be any chances of error, and whatever error we will face, we can display error somewhere else, so that we can go to know that where we are stucking, right? So now it's time to add the filter here, change the filter. So whenever user will click on any of the row, that filter should be changed. So how it will change? So whenever user will click on any of the row, event will occur. That event will call the action chain, and that action chain is doing all these things. Now here we have to add one more additional thing, and that additional thing should be to change the filter condition of this row, and pass the, what should be the value? Pass the value that we are fetching here, we are getting here, this one D004. So again we have to go to the action chain. So in the action chain, if you will see what we have done, so whenever the page is loaded, right, so we updated the filter criteria of this table, department table, and now we have to change this one. So if you will see in the action chain, whatever row user is selecting, we are storing that row data into this variable, the variable employee details var, and that variable having three columns, the department ID, employee ID, and the ID, and we require this department ID values, right? So how we can do the changes? So go to the variable again, and here you can see what is the variable behind this table. The variable behind this table we have is the department BO list SDP. So if you will click here, you can see the filter criteria. If you will click here in the filter criteria, we hard coded the value department is equals to -1. If we will change this value -1 to that value coming from that variable, it will solve our purpose, right? So here we have to expand that one. This is the department. If we will click here, or here you can see the employee details var dot department ID. So here we can select here variable dot employee details. So let me search that employee details. You can see the variable dot employee details var dot employee ID department ID, and we want to map with this department ID. So now here you can see we have added the filter condition to that variable of this business endpoint. So whenever this page will load, right, whenever this page will load, this table value will be mapped with the variable. So what variable we mapped? So in this business object, if you will see department here in the filter condition, if you will again see, so the variable we created, employee details variable, whatever value will be inside this variable dot department ID, that will be mapped with this filter condition of the department ID, right? So if you will go to the action chain, so whenever user will select on any row, it will invoke the rest endpoint to get that row details, that row details it will insert in that variable, and that variable value we have already mapped in this filter criteria of this employee details, so that whatever user will select the row, that row value will reflect here in the filter condition, and it will show the data based on that row, right? So in initial time, whenever this page will load first time, that variable having the null value, and based on that null value it will not show any records. So let me run this application again. So here when we are running this application, you can see once the page loaded first time, it's showing the data, right? So we can restrict that later. So if we will click here in the first row, the first row having the department at D001, and if you will go to the below, the second table is displaying data only for D001 department. They doesn't have any different department. If we will click on the second row, which having the department at D04, it will display only record which having the department D04, and we have only one record with D04. If you will go to the business object of department BO, go to the data, you can see the department D04 having only one row, this one operation. That's why it's showing only one here. If we will select here as D02, the row having the department and D02, and it will showing the department only having 02. value as D02. That kind of things, yes, we can do. Here we don't require this notification right now because we are done with our development and we are sure that our data is coming properly. So here we have to go to the page. If we will go to the action chain, we don't require this notification. We will delete this notification. Right now, if we will go to the page again, if we will run this application, this time notification will not display. So let me just show this one. Now, whatever row we are selecting, based on that row, it's showing the data, but it's not showing that notification. That's removed. But here we have one issue. So whenever this page is loading, it's showing all the department details. That should not display, right? That's the issue. So what we can do on the page load event only, we will again change the filter condition. So this is our page, and here in event, if we will go to the page event, here we will enter event. So we have that variable created, right? This variable having the value of the department ID for each and every row user is going to select. So in initial time, we will make this department ID as null so that it will not display any value. So here we will go to the action chain. This action chain is for the page VB inter event. Now here we will to go for the assignment. We will select the variable that is the employee details var, and in that variable we have to select for the department ID, and I want to map this department ID as -1, any hard coded value. You can see that -1. So whenever page will load, it will invoke this action chain, and this action chain having the assign operation, that variable ID is going to be as -1. Go to the page again, and whenever user will click on any of the row, it will call another action chain, that action chain having following operation. So again it will change the value. So now here we have to go to the running this application. So obviously when you will work on the development, you can debug the things, you one by one you can solve the issue. So right now you can see we don't have any records because in the page VB inter event only, the page load event only, we updated the condition to show the data from here. So whenever we will select of any of the row, that based on that row, below table will having the data. If we will select the row as 106 employee ID having the department D01 and D01 department having 3 rows, right? So that 3 rows is here we are able to see. So that kind of things we are going to work on to display the data dependently on any other one. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any other queries and you want to ask anything, don't forget to write and comment. And if you like the content I am sharing, the way effort I am making, if you want to support this effort, you can join membership. That will be considered as a support to our institute. Thank you so much for watching.